Ladies and gentlemen, in the interest of your safety and your own personal safety, we ask that you keep a close watch on your carry-ons and personal belongings.
Welcome to the AeroExploration podcast, where aviation's past, present, and future meet. We explore the stories that build aviation history, take you inside the industry today, and uncover the career paths and innovations keeping the industry in motion. We go behind the scenes, into the cockpit, and onto the ramp, meeting the people and discovering the places that define aviation. If it's part of the flying world, you'll find it here. This is AeroExploration.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the AeroExploration podcast. My name is Jim, and I'm your host. And on today's episode, we're going to be pulling back the curtain on an invisible crisis in the industry. That crisis is a workforce shortage that's grounding not just big airliners, but your local Cessnas, Moonies, Pipers, your flight school ramp, and the independent repair shops. So over the course of this episode, we're going to be talking about not just the shortage itself, but how did we get here, what the problems are today, and what are the implications of this shortage. So across the U.S. and globally, there is a mounting shortage of qualified aircraft maintenance technicians. Most of the time, we refer to them as airframe and power mechanics, or AMPs, in the general aviation side. This shortage is not just a blip. This is a trend that has been building for years now, and it's starting to accelerate even further. Some of the forecasts that are out there are pretty stark. There was a report published by Oliver Wyman called Not Enough Aviation Mechanics, and that report estimates that by 2027, North America could be short as many as 48,000 maintainers, and that's the worst case side of it. On the lower end of that, the gap could be around 43,000 maintainers that we would be short. As we talk about maintenance issues, we end up talking about delays, and we might think that those delays are just related to your big carriers. You're waiting to go on that exciting trip to wherever, and now you can't go because your flight's been delayed for maintenance. But this also crosses into the general aviation category. Those small private plane owners, our flight schools, they're also feeling the squeeze. That pipeline of train maintainers for GA is even thinner, and the stakes feel a little bit closer to home for those of us on the GA side. Pilots are waiting longer and longer for their annual inspections. You have owners watching their planes sit on the ground waiting for parts and maintenance, and you have flight schools that are understaffed of maintainers. You also have independent shops that are starting to turn away work simply because they are not staffed enough to handle the workload. We know that it's an issue, but how did we get here? Well, let's start with the people. We're at a point now where we have senior technicians that are starting to leave the industry. And in aviation, experience can be everything. So this can be anything from the ability to hear a subtle vibration and know what it is, and then the instincts and intuition that you build over decades of training. And it's not just taught in a textbook. You have to be there, you have to experience it, you have to see that problem and figure out how to fix it. But those decades of experience, they're just leaving the workforce. In the United States, the median age of an FAA certified mechanic is 52 years old, or about 10 years older than the general workforce. About 35% of those, according to an FAA workforce report, are nearing retirement, and the pandemic had accelerated that exodus. Veteran techs took early retirements, and that left a vacuum that younger generations just haven't filled yet. Now, commercial aviation has been sounding the bell on this for years. Back in 2017, Wyman had warned that the shortage of mechanics could jeopardize fleet expansion and modernization. Even then, he predicted that the gap would widen through the 2020s, and here we are. So you fast forward to today, and you see the disease, and it has metastasized. Let's go back and revisit the pandemic once again. During that time, airlines had to ground their fleets, and there was a ripple effect that wasn't just in lost revenue, it triggered waves of early retirements. Thousands of seasoned mechanics, squeezed by uncertainty and burnout, accepted severances, and they moved on. Many never returned. By some accounts, entire hangars lost more than half of their most experienced staff between 2020 and 2022. In these shops today, you're going to see younger and younger faces, trainees, apprentices, rookies, and they're shouldering a lot more responsibility before they've had that time to internalize the institutional knowledge from those that have left already. Now, on the GA side, the aging workforce is again more acute. Many of the independent A&Ps and general aviation shops are nearing that retirement age also. and there's no one to replace them who has that mix of hands-on experience and decades of knowledge and expertise in working on aircraft. There are many A&P mechanics out there that are so knowledgeable and experienced with the aircraft that they work on that they're able to pick up on the subtle intricacies of a problem with an individual aircraft, just based on the years of working with it. Not unlike their commercial side counterparts, during the pandemic, many of the veteran A&Ps also opted for early retirement or a less demanding pace. Some of them left general aviation altogether. In GA, the financial pressures are a little bit different. It's less stable revenue and thinner margins. So the attractiveness dropped at the possibility of staying in this high-stress, high-responsibility work. So what's being done right now to backfill all those open positions that all these years of experience has left? Well, let's look at this like a pipeline, where we recruit, train, certify, and deploy. We've got some leaks in that pipeline. Across the United States, the broader aviation maintenance workforce is over 431,000 people. This covers everything from our certified mechanics, the folks at the airlines, GA repair stations. So in 2024, the FAA certified just over 9,000 new A&P mechanics. Enrollment in maintenance schools is on the rise, which is encouraging, but still, schools are reporting that about 1/3 of their available training seats go unused. Meanwhile, the share of the workforce that's made up of these newly certified A&Ps is fairly small, and the pace simply can't keep up with the retirements, resignations, and attrition. Part of the problem that the A&P industry deals with today is something we heard in one of our last episodes, where there's a perception about being an aircraft mechanic, where you picture someone covered in grease with wrenches and torque wrenches and oily overalls and just a dirty, grimy job. But the reality of this job has shifted dramatically, and today it's more engineering than it is elbow grease. You have A&Ps that are working with composite materials, digital diagnostic systems, predictive analytics, smart sensors, avionics and software upgrades, and the list of modern technology enhancements continues. Yet this modern image rarely reaches our high schools and community colleges through awareness campaigns. Many students see tech, IT, software, robotics as the glamorous careers. They're less dusty, they're more future forward. So it's hard to compete with that, especially when you have to build that pipeline again from the ground up. Then there's the funding and infrastructure and scaling challenges. Many programs lack the sufficient tools, live aircraft, the mentoring capacity, or the partnerships with the airlines. And even when a student completes their training, the leap to independent certified work takes a lot of time, mentoring, and informal bench time, which, as you'll remember, fewer and fewer retired mentors are available to provide that. The results? Thousands of high-paying seats remain underused, and that gap ripples upward into the maintenance shops and the hangars. So what does this mean for the GA side? Well, the pressure on the general aviation side is double. GA requires maintainers not only to schedule inspections, safety checks, and repairs, but also often for less structured work, like annuals on older or antique airframes, owner-assisted maintenance, restorations, and custom modifications. These tasks need skilled and experienced hands. Where GA shops lose out in recruiting is because many of the new graduates are drawn towards the more predictable pay and prestige of commercial or airline jobs. In more rural and remote areas, GA owners often have to wait much longer than the airline customers for maintenance availability. And there's a lot of times where you're going to have to take your aircraft, fly it off of your field to where the A&P is at to have the work done in the first place. Mechanics in this space are stretched pretty thin, and I'm not talking about just the work itself. In addition to those stressors, there's also this market where parts are harder and harder to source for some of these older aircraft. And the customers aren't always as patient, so that's another aspect that they have to deal with as well. Because no one wants their plane to be sitting down for months and months while you wait for a part, but sometimes that's the reality of the space that we have found ourselves in. There are also signs that the shortage is already having real consequences in GA. You have owners that are reporting longer wait times for inspection slots. You have some GA repair stations delaying non-urgent maintenance. You've got shops with reduced hours, and they're just taking on fewer repair contracts. So what does this tell us about what's happening today in the maintenance world? When the supply of maintenance talent is constrained, what does it mean in real terms? In delays, cancellations, and the costs. So a small mechanical check, say a sensor that's not reading properly. This used to be able to be resolved within a few hours. With fewer mechanics and more backlog, that same check might drag into a full day delay as the staff scrambles and they try to find parts. The unplanned maintenance is especially brutal. A part failure or anomaly that wasn't caught earlier forces people to scramble. diagnosing, replacing, and testing. That is far more disruptive and costly than scheduled checks. Now, when your margins of slack are already pretty thin for this type of work, the impacts multiply. Let's take a look at the per minute costs of this. Now, the airlines will estimate that when a plane is stuck, each minute that it's on the ground costs well over $100 in direct operating expenses. That's fuel, that's the crew, airport fees, and scheduling waste. Add in those soft costs of rebooking passengers, hotels and vouchers, and those losses escalate pretty quickly. Delta Airlines noted that rising maintenance expenses are starting to cut into their profit margins, showing that this is a crisis that has real financial consequences. To get the full picture of the cascading effect of these costs, the maintenance delays alone are costing the U.S. aviation industry $1.4 billion per year in lost revenue. Now, bear in mind that that's an estimate because rarely do you find a breakout section in a financial statement that says maintenance caused disruption as being an isolated place within a budget. So most industry commentary puts disruption costs across staffing, across the maintenance itself, operational failures, and that's in the hundreds of millions annually for large carriers. Another striking illustration here is a study that estimates that in 2022, delays at Denver International Airport alone amounted to over 1,000 collective years of lost passengers' time. Obviously, this is summing up each individual person's delay to get to that number. Now, not every second of the 1,000 collective years derives specifically from maintenance, but it does show how big these disruptions can be at scale. In such a high-stakes environment, less experienced mechanics take longer on tasks. It's just how it is. Years and years of experience helps you perform the tasks in a more efficient manner. And if you're not experienced yet, you just don't have those skills yet. You just have to build them. With that, they might need to consult more. They might have to double-check things a little bit more frequently and verify very carefully their work. Now, this burden also shifts to the shrinking core of veterans, and they have to have an even more watchful eye for mistakes and inefficiencies. It's a real pressure cooker for them, and it's a lot of stress. One grounded plane rarely affects just one flight. I think we all probably know that your plane is going to go to somewhere else and then somewhere else. In reality, it can disrupt 5 or 6 flights in a single day. This sets off then a cascade of delays and cancellations across the network. In modern airline scheduling, aircraft are chained. So a plane that lands at DFW might fly next to Houston and Phoenix and Salt Lake City. If that plane gets stuck at DFW, everything downstream of that flight has to shift. There's also the weakening of fleet utilization to begin with, meaning fewer healthy aircraft available to meet the schedules. Airlines may try to compensate by keeping spare aircraft on standby, which is a plane parked, ready but not actively used. Expensive capital is just sitting idle. But it's insurance, not revenue generation. So let's anchor this point with some recent numbers, both in commercial and general aviation. In 2024, one pipeline report projects a 20% shortfall in certified mechanics by 2028, just for commercial aviation. That is equivalent to about 25,000 certified mechanics needed just to meet the airline and cargo commercial demands. Add in general aviation, business aviation, and repair shops, and those demands go up a lot higher. These sectors also need maintainers, and many of them are already under-resourced. These figures warn that even if commercial aviation somehow stabilizes its shortage, the GA side will still be lagging even further behind. And that gap could reduce safety margins, reduce access, and increase costs for small aircraft owners and flight schools. So let's creep back into the GA side of this a little bit more and see what the shortage looks like day to day for general aviation. A pilot hoping to fly a small plane may get grounded because the mechanic slot is booked out weeks or months in advance. And that's not just inconvenience. For flight schools, that means they have to cancel lesson slots, and that disrupts training schedules. For GA owners, the delays in annual inspections, issues with older components, means sometimes more of a repair upon repair approach rather than preventative maintenance. And this costs you a lot more in the long run and can cause some safety risks. Our independent GA shops are often having less leverage with parts manufacturers. Older or obscure parts may have longer lead times or may be expensive in small quantities. I can tell you from firsthand experience that yes, those shops are in fact having a harder time finding parts for these older aircraft. As we've been doing this engine overhaul, we've experienced that a few times where our mechanic has ordered parts and it has taken a significant amount of time for those parts to get here. So from the GA consumer side of this, financially, they're starting to have to pay more per hour for labor on many older or less standard airframes. And this is in part because there's less competition in the market. Labor rates can also be high for airline experienced mechanics doing GA work. But shops may struggle to retain these mechanics when commercial employers are offering better stability benefits and pay. And then there's the obvious ripple in time, opportunity, and costs of if your plane's sitting on the ground and you're using it commercially, you're not earning any income. If you're flight school, you're losing time of rentals. Or if you're trying to learn, this is valuable training time that is now lost as you sit idle. All right, so we've had quite a conversation about what is going on, but how do we fix this? Well, the answer is slowly and carefully in multiple dimensions. This isn't going to be just an overnight pivot, but there's some things that are already in motion. The problem includes airlines and general aviation, and the solution needs to address both of them. The first thing would be rebuilding that pipeline. Across the United States, new training programs and facility upgrades are already in motion. For instance, Ames Community College in Colorado has announced investments in its aviation maintenance training infrastructure. There's also industry school partnerships that are multiplying. More airlines are starting to offer tuition support, co-op internships and apprenticeships, and conditional job offers that are tied to graduation from one of these programs. That helps reduce the risk for the student and ensures better alignment of skills with the employer's needs. Agencies like the Aviation Technician Education Council also now regularly publish a pipeline report. It highlights just how deep the gaps are in the airframe and power plant staffing. We also need to rebrand this job. Like Patrick said in our last episode, they are much more like engineers now than they are the greasy trades that you've seen in the past. So to attract younger talent, the industry has to focus that voice and emphasize that this is no longer just a greasy trade. There is some real high tech in this profession. Help them to imagine that you're diagnosing failures via sensor data, you're deploying AI algorithms to predict wear on aircraft parts, you're using augmented reality tools to remote inspect, and you're employing drones to inspect wing surfaces. If the schools and the recruiters and, well, all of us can shift that image from wrench turner to a systems engineer, I think we can get the candidate pool to widen. And so do the experts. The other thing we have to look at is raising compensation and incentives. The money has to be right. In May of 2024, the median annual wage for aircraft mechanics and service technicians in the United States was $78,000 per year, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. But entry-level roles, regional shops, and lower-cost markets may start far below that. But on the other side of that, your top-tier roles, your senior specialists, roles in high-cost regions, and those that have heavy overtime and shift premiums can push compensation well above six figures. Some employers have even raised wages double digits in short spans. We also can look at bonuses, retention incentives, relocation packages, and career progression pathways as all becoming part of that recruitment pitch for new mechanics. Engineers. There's also policy, regulation, and a bit of strategy. No solution can stick without proper policy support. Some discussions are already underway about allowing more flexible ratings or allowing some modifications in the way GA mechanics are certified. Ensuring that pathways are safe but less burdensome could help here. An important note here is the regulations still need to uphold safety. You can't have a trade-off here where you're going to compromise safety. We also have to encourage continuing education and skills maintenance for the GA mechanics that are out there. As the older fleet ages, knowledge about older systems is still going to be valuable. But something to keep in mind is it may require specialized training that many tech schools aren't sufficiently providing yet. Something else GA shops are going to have to compete with is the pay. A lot of GA mechanics aren't leaving those shops because they dislike the work. It's because the commercial airlines are offering steadier hours, better perks, better pay and benefits. GA operations often have a little bit more variability in income. So incentives like retention bonuses, small business grants, and state tax breaks might help here. We also have to recognize that in GA, part of the quote-unquote pay here is the lifestyle that they can maintain. You're working in a smaller shop, you've got more diverse tasks, and sometimes being closer to home and having more autonomy could be important here. So these non-monetary values can be emphasized as you're trying to recruit as well. Another thing that we're starting to see more and more of is the early STEM programs or vocational outreach in the high schools, community colleges, and some underserved communities. In Flying Midwest podcast, we've talked several times about articles that have been out there about this school is having this STEM program, that school is building this STEM program. And more of them are starting to build towards the mechanical side and not just the pilots. So I think that the industry needs to continue doing that to make sure that we're getting the right message out to the voices that could be the future generation of our A&P mechanics. If we can get the industry, educators, and the government all to align, the needle can start to move. What happens if we don't act? If we ignore this, the consequences aren't just going to be abstract. They'll be deeply felt in GA, and they'll trickle up and out. For example, more grounded GA plans means less availability of training slots, which are going to reduce future pilots because more grounded GA plans leads to less availability of training slots, which may reduce future pilots. We all know that person who has started their training to be a pilot who have ultimately left for one reason or another. And sometimes that is the consistency of aircraft or delays that they've experienced. So if we can get rid of one of those little nuances, that helps to build the pilot population as well. But to do that, you need to have mechanics. We also have to look at the higher costs for small aircraft maintenance as labor and parts are more scarce. We're also going to have an increase in reduced safety margins if maintenance gets delayed or if corners start to get cut. We might also look at some loss of GA culture, experimental flying, recreational aviation, and local flight schools, all of which contribute not just to leisure, but to innovation, workforce development, and regional connectivity. On the commercial side, that effect will only worsen. Delays, cancellations, network fragility. But the baseline matters here. GA is a foundational layer, and if that layer erodes, the whole aviation ecosystem is weakened. So as I wrap up here, the invisible threat in the hangar is real. It's not just about big jets. It's also about small aircraft flight schools, our weekend pilots, and independent mechanics who make it all possible to fly at all. We're finding ourselves at a crossroad here, and the stability and safety of aviation depends on those A&Ps, and just as much on the general aviation side as the major carriers. Facing this workforce shortage head-on is not optional. It's essential. So the next time that you're delayed, or your annual inspection of your aircraft is postponed, or you hear maintenance is the reason, remember that behind the scenes, there's people under pressure, in small shops, in large hangars, stretched thin, but still striving. Their work helps keep our industry intact. What thoughts do you have on the A&P shortage? I'd love to hear from you, so send me an email at jim@flyingmidwest.com, or you can reach out to me on any of my social medias, which are aero_exploration. Also, I'm always looking for guests or interesting stories to tell, so if you would like to be a future guest, or you know someone who is and they've got a great story or pathway that would be beneficial to our community or just plain entertaining, you can also reach out to me at jim@flyingmidwest.com to share your story, and maybe we can have you on a future episode. Finally, my plea again for ratings, reviews, please jump on wherever you're listening to this, leave a 5-star rating, leave a review, and I will read those reviews in future episodes. Well, thanks again, everyone, for joining me on this episode. This is Aero Exploration, and we will see you next time.